Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the group by clause. When we talked about aggregation, we mentioned that we cannot have in one query results from different aggregate levels. So for example, if we look at our query, where I fetch just the job ID and the salary from our employees table on HR schema, for example, what if we want to fetch a sum of all the salaries or the average of salaries for particular job ID, for example, for FI account, IT prog, and so on. Of course, we can do that by multiple queries where our limit results by the job ID, like following. So I would include my where clause, where job ID equals IT prog, right? And we could fetch, for example, average of that salary, right? And we would get that average salary returned. But what if we want to fetch all of the averages, all of the sums, and so on for every job ID? So let's return to our previous query. And let's include the group by clause. So I want to group my results by the job ID. I do that as following. Group by and the job ID, right? And now it is a must to include an aggregate function. So I want to fetch the average of the salary and group that by the job ID. So when I execute this query, we can see that we got results back as the average salary for each department. So we can see the IT proc has average of 5,760 and so on. Of course, on the same aggregate level, I can also include multiple aggregate functions, but again, on the same aggregate level. So for example, I'm adding the sum, so we can now see the average and the sum for every job ID present in the employees table. Of course, I can add any number of aggregate functions to that query. So for example, if I want to check how many are employees included for each job ID, I can do the count of all of the records in the grouping. So for example, we can see for the IT prog, we have 5 employees, HR rep has 1, and so on. Also, we can do that multiple splitting. So for example, not all employees for one job ID report to the same manager ID. So we can expand our query and fetch also the manager ID. But important thing is that we have to also group for every select list item we are fetching. So if I want to fetch the manager ID, we have to also group by manager ID. As, for example, for IT prog, couple of employees could report to one manager and couple of them to other manager. So we cannot fetch the manager ID as they report to different ones. So when I execute this query, so for example, for our IT prog, we can see that one person reports to the manager with the ID 102 and 4 persons report to the manager with the manager ID 103. And of course, the average and the sum of salaries is calculated by those groupings. So the average salary for those 4 persons that report to the same manager and are with the same job ID have average salary of 4,950 and the sum is 90,800. Very nice. Check this query in the resources, play around, and try to get different results by yourself. See you in the next one.